I'm Barbara Peters. Welcome to this episode of the Criminal Calendar. You may perceive us today as a somewhat breathless duet because our author, who is from Ireland, has flown in and actually driven himself to Scottsdale. How are you so brave, Mr. Connolly?
Brave. Actually, the last time I was in Scottsdale, I saw 3 car accidents in the space of about 3 hours, and I thought, my God, these people are lethal. Maybe I should get out of the car and walk.
Just in Los Angeles, is Phoenix a doddle comparative?
Los Angeles was quite temperate by comparison. Phoenix is a dry heat, as everybody says. When you're looking at 105 degrees in the car, thinking, yeah, but hey, it's a dry heat. I actually quite like it. It's such a contrast to what I'm used to in Ireland, where everything is green and it rains a lot. And then I come here and I think, my God, this is alien territory for me. So it's quite a culture shock when I come to this part of the world.
Well, we'll talk later about why your books seem to be set in America, even though you're from Ireland, although obviously not in Scottsdale. But where in Ireland do you live? In the Dublin area?
I live in Dublin. I live in a suburb called Rathgar, which is one of the old suburbs. It's strange. Dublin was for so long a very small city, and then they began to build suburbs, which in real terms would be the distance from Old Town Scottsdale to the other end of Old Town Scottsdale, because there would be fields in the middle. So I live in one of those first of those old suburbs, in an old Gothic house.
I asked the question because I get to visit Dublin for the first time soon, and is my want when I'm coming to Ireland, I wrote to you for tour guide services.
I am running Crap Tours Inc., as they say, where I give people suggestions, and it's fun because I get to point people towards places where I'm not necessarily always on the tourist trail, but things that I like. I think one of the places I suggested to you was St. Michan's Crypt, which I really like, which is an old Protestant church, and underneath it had a series of crypts in which the wealthy were buried. And because of the peculiar, it's limestone, and because it was very, very dry, all of these things have been preserved. So they have these wonderful old mummies that you can touch, including one of an old Crusader knight, and it's supposed to be good luck to touch his hand.
Really?
So his hand, you can go into the crypt, and they had to break his legs, they had to lop off his ankles to fit him into the box. So you go in and you touch his fingers, and then you leave again. What other city would offer you that? You know, really, we're prepared to hustle the dead bodies of the people who have passed through our great city in order to get a couple of books off American tourists. What a great country I live in.
You absolutely do. This is the Celtic Tiger running amok.
There you go. This is how we made money, you know. We're a poor but proud people.
Hey, you probably found this as a survivalist technique before Ireland joined the EU, and you guys suddenly had this influx of dollars. You know, isn't it amazing how your country has changed since in the last half century? I'm just blown away by it.
Well, we became very wealthy very quickly.
Absolutely.
And then we're about to become quite poor again very quickly. I think we're going into recession now, because when America gets drunk, we get the hangover, essentially. And the problems that you're experiencing here, we're taking kind of the aftershocks from them. So I think it'll be interesting, because there is a whole generation in Ireland that has never known unemployment, has never known any poverty, has never known a situation where you didn't have money in your pocket. And we're in need of a kind of wake-up call a little bit to say, look, it's not always going to be like this, and we didn't always have the good times. Although that's very easy for me to say, given that, you know, I can support myself and pay my mortgage, and I'm sure there are people in Dublin, if they think that, well, we'll go and rob his house just to show him, you know, if he's going to think he's so smart. So it'll be interesting. There'll be a kind of leveling off over the next few years, I think.
Are these people who think that the whole famine ship thing was just some sort of Celtic fairy tale?
It was, well, you know, we don't have there's two schools out there. There are those of us who think, my family never went anywhere. I have no relatives in Australia or America. We saw all these people leaving and thought, right, more potatoes for us. Bye. You know, don't rush back. And then I come here and I'll meet people who left a generation or so ago, and they'll be full of fondness. I was in Chicago about a year ago, and the doorman at the hotel heard my accent, and he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Dublin." He says, "Oh, I'm from Galway." And I said, "When did you leave?" And he said, "I left about 50 years ago." And he said, "Oh," and he said, I said, "Do you go back?" And he said, "I go back every year or two." He says, "Well, I don't like it now." He says, "It's full of immigrants and people, you know." And they had a Corpus Christi parade through the town, and there were all kinds of people, not white people, marching in it, you know. And he said, "That wasn't the Ireland that I knew and loved." And you look at him and think, if it was so great, why didn't you stay and suffer with the rest of us? You know, we all had to put up with it for ages, and now we quite like the way that it's become multicultural. And I think people who are first or second generation over here want Ireland to remain a kind of fairy tale.
Sure, I can see that.
And kind of set in aspic, and that we'd have old little walls and little old men sitting smoking on it, and we were poor but happy. And we've lost some of that because of necessity. As a country gets a little wealthier, you do lose a little bit of your charm and character. But at the same time, it's a lot better than the place I grew up in. which was very, very grim. And you know, I remember all of my friends having to emigrate, and people just routinely had to go away. There was no work in Ireland, and I prefer it the way it is now. I'll take the loss of a couple of bars and a couple of old lads sitting on walls smoking. You know, it's a smaller price to pay.
Well, my last visit there, which you kindly mapped out for me, and my husband, and we drove about a bit in the West, I was amazed. And for one thing, we not only had fabulous food, but really good coffee, which I have to tell you, for a junkie like me, a caffeine junkie, is like, you know, because legendarily, England and Ireland had swill instead of coffee.
We had dire coffee. Even Bewley's, which I loved, a chain of very old kind of coffee shops in Dublin, made routinely terrible coffee. You went in for the charm of sitting in Bewley's and being served by a lady who looked like your gran, you know, and would call you darling or love while she made you coffee, and then poisoned you, essentially, you know, just the vilest coffee. We've got a bit better, and Irish cuisine has come on a lot.
Oh, it was absolutely terrific. My husband, you know, the food king, was absolutely in awe. But one of the things I love best about you and I have known each other for a really long time, and being as we meet in the book world, which is not a place of necessarily high luxury, when we meet each other, I was so blown away that the first place you sent me was a castle.
Ashford
and
Castle.
A really big castle.
A really big castle.
Do you know they send me cards?
Do they?
Constantly, I get e-cards. Christmas at Ashford Castle, come and spend this at Ashford. They're like my best friend.
We brought, my girlfriend's parents came over from South Africa, and we decided to treat them to Ashford Castle. And her mother is a bird watcher, a twitcher, as they call them, I believe, in the technical term. And they have, the Ireland's only school of falconry is attached to the castle.
It is, so which we went to see,
which is
wonderful.
Yeah, so we brought her out we brought her out with Harris hawks on her arm, and I think she was amazingly moved in that if you're a bird watcher, you tend to see them at a distance, or if you do see them, they're rescue birds and they're in a cage, and to be able to take out a bird, quite a big bird of prey on your arm and set it off, hunting was just a real experience for us. So I love Ashford. Ashford is, I mean, it is very much, it's luxury Ireland, I suppose, but those things are if you can afford it occasionally, and you wouldn't want to be doing it every week because you'd be on the street, but if you can afford it every couple of years to do something like that, it's a real treat, and we do things like that quite well. And in Ashford, what I like about a lot of the places in Ireland is that they're not very obsequious or anything. They don't go overboard, and people don't really call you sir or ma'am too much. They tend to look for your first name. When I went in this time, one of the doormen had read one of my books, and he was quite pleased, so I met him and we were chatting away, and then I took my girlfriend's father to the local bar because we wanted to watch a football game.
Were you in the little village attached?
Little village of Cong attached, Cong.
That's
Cong. And the doorman had ordered drinks for us, had told the barman not to let us pay for our drinks. And I thought that's a very nice thing to do. And I think while Dublin has changed a lot and has become a very, very prosperous, busy city, outside of Dublin, people still have a little bit of time for you, and are still very conscious that you should be kind to visitors.
I thought that the pace of life was very relaxed and very lovely. I must say I was mildly amused when I made my husband detour so I could go up and see the cliffs of Moher, and I realized I was probably like one of the last American tourists who would get to just walk up or hike up the hill and look at the cliffs, because they were building one of those, quote, visitor centers where they were going to charge you like 20 pounds or whatever to go do it. And I came back and said to Rob, you know, the professional tourism has struck Ireland, and it's really changing.
Yeah, we're not sure about that thing on the cliffs of Moher. It looks like something they would have built on the French coast to repel the D-Day invasion. This thing that everything has to be explained to you, that everything needs an interpretive centre.
Interpretive centre.
Yeah, you know, it needs to, you know, it has to have a car park and a coffee shop, and it was nice that you could go rambling up the cliffs of Moher. I used to, the worst job I ever had was as a barman at the Lisdoonvarna Matchmaking Festival in County Clare, which is quite near the cliffs of Moher. I had to share a house with the Ollie Maloney Trumpet Band. Not a thing that I would wish on any human being. And occasionally on my day off, I would escape to the cliffs of Moher, and I would walk up and I would sit on the edge of them with my legs hanging over, and I would read a book. And I still, occasionally I think of throwing myself off at the thought of having to listen to Ollie Maloney's set for another night. But there was something really quite magical about them. They are stunning.